Welcome to We Are Libertarians. I am your host, Creighton Harrington. To my left is Chris Gault. And to my right is a guest host today, Mr. Will Quantz, a friend of mine that I brought in because our favorite host, Chris Gault, is out for the day on vacation. Everybody say hi. Yeah,
it's nice to not.
That's Spangle clapping.
It's
we know
nice
how
to
he feels.
nice to not have him here today.
Yes, Chris. When you listen to this, that was Spangle that
He
clapped.
brings his stupid Red Bulls in here and he leaves them, and then Rupert comes in to do his podcast right after. And every week Rupert goes, "Make sure you clean up your Red Bull. Don't leave trash around." I'm like, "It's not mine." He's like, "You damn kids with your Red Bulls."
Yeah. So. Well. So I guess we'll leave the elephant in the room for later, and everyone knows what that is that's listening.
Yeah, we just already said Chris isn't here. So
okay. But I guess we can start off with the recalls in Wisconsin. What do you guys make of it? I mean,
well, it's really hard to not believe. I mean, people want to change now. I mean, Canada done it several years ago. It's happened in some of the countries in Europe. You've got to have some kind of austerity, and whether it's making someone pay another 5% on their benefits or whatever it may be, you have to make those changes. It has to come, and I'm glad someone actually had the guts to stick with it and stick by their guns. And it turned out well for him and the lieutenant governor.
Yeah, I agree. I think mostly the way I'm kind of looking at it, outside of the whole moral issue of paying for what you get from the government, I'm looking at it as kind of like in the future. I think this is less of what is the word they always use when there's a midterm election or a special election about the presidency?
Are you talking about a recall?
No, I don't know. It's just whatever term they use to say, this is an assumption. This is assumption about the presidential election.
Oh yeah,
whatever they call it. But anyway,
a referendum.
Referendum. There you go.
Yes.
And I look at it more as a referendum on, I think, the influence of unions within American politics. I think what we are witnessing is the first substantial cue that they're kind of a dying breed. I think it's more of a referendum on unions and the lack of pull they'll have in the future. Because, I mean, let's be clear, the unions picked this fight. Mm-hmm. The Democratic Party, I don't think, really picked the fight. I think the unions picked the fight. I feel like they were kind of trying to ride this wave of enthusiasm, anger over, all the stuff that Walker said he was going to pass, and they tried to kick him out, and they lost. Big time.
Well, if it would have been part of the Democrat Party's plan, then Obama wouldn't have stayed in Chicago. He would have gone up there. Bill Clinton wouldn't have been the one to go in. He's the great middle ground man. From the '90s, he tries to be, at least, even though Congress shut down for a year.
Well, there's questions on Clinton's loyalties or his state of mind.
He's not crazy. He's just...
Well, I mean, they're trying to say that he's going through dementia because of all the stuff he's been helping. He kind of said the Bain Capital wasn't a bad thing and all this kind of stuff. They're that's just Clinton. He's old. He's going through dementia.
This is the man that was part of the Whitewater deal.
No, it's just they're trying, because Clinton kind of put his foot in his mouth as far as the Democratic Party's message. Obama's trying to run against Bain Capital as part of running against Romney, and Clinton was like, Bain Capital, private equity is not too bad, really.
Yeah, because Democrats raise a ton of money from private equity.
They raise a ton of money from everybody they hate.
Right. I mean, and unions, I think Walker... This is just one of those silly little political things. It's like, oh, let's see if we can kick him out. Let's see if we can just try and cause him some misery. That I don't know. Public sector unions, I don't really have a problem with private sector unions. That's a voluntary relationship between a business and their labor force.
As long as there's no government protection of those private sector unions.
Yeah, exactly. But when it comes to a public sector union, and even FDR agreed with this, that's a group of people holding taxpayers hostage. And by basically saying, you're going to give us this, you're going to give us this, or we're going to stop serving the public.
Well, the worst part about it all is they come into a state like Wisconsin and go, oh, the governor's evil, these people are evil. But yet the federal government, they don't have a union. They're not allowed to unionize. That was covered under the Wagner Act. So how are these, how it just shows, the bigotry of the party. They go from one side to the other. They're fine with the federal government as long as they don't have, because they give them money. But when a state goes against them, it's a mafia
Maybe
style
more
thing.
the
We're going to break some stuff. We're going to go to your town square.
We're going to poop on the Capitol.
Exactly.
Yeah, the hypocrisy of it. I mean, it just, and you'll find that in any party, but especially, the Republicans and Democrats, it's just very hypocritical practices. We'll take money from people that we disagree with. But I think that, do you guys think that Walker did the right thing by ending right to work, ending the collective bargaining? That was literally one of the very first things Mitch Daniels did when he came into office. And the unions got upset about it, but it wasn't necessarily... it was nowhere near the catastrophe that it seemed like in Wisconsin.
I don't think Indiana is nearly as union-centered as Wisconsin is.
It used to be. It used to be, but you look at towns like Anderson and Muncie.
Well, yeah,
and
there's a few cities maybe, but I feel like Wisconsin's one of those diehard union states. It's always like, I mean, I don't know exactly why, but it just feel like historically they've been really, they've been at least proud of the fact that they're very unionized. I don't know. I think it's a good idea to end collective bargaining for public sector unions. I mean, like you said, I'd get rid of public sector unions in their entirety. I think it was a good move as far as, what's right and what's wrong. I also think it was a good political move because, I mean, after he won his recall election by more than he won his regular election. I feel like it's going to do more to, raise the enthusiasm of his base than it will to not raise the. I think he'll still do well when he goes for re-election. I think he's going to have I think he politically he made a good call, doing all this and whatnot, and he survived and all this. I mean, it was like really one of the hardest things you can do as a governor is kind of attack these sacred cows, and he did it. And he survived a recall election.
And it's really one of the biggest problems, I think, for libertarians is you look at something like that and you think, okay, most libertarians want to end something like Social Security. They go out, they talk about ending Social Security. Could you imagine? This is just right to work. This affects like 8% of Indiana's population, the right to work law here in Indiana. And look at the fuss that we had in Indiana. It took 2 years. The legislature left twice. And Wisconsin did it, and it's a national referendum for the governor.
And Wisconsin didn't even do near as much as we did. Am I right? They just ended their ability. They just
ended collective bargaining.
Did they?
Right.
But I thought they didn't even do that. They just said you have to pay into your pension some.
Yeah. He did do away with the collective bargaining, and then he also did. You have to pay a little more on your benefits, your pension, and your health care. And I think it was a small amount. Really, it was like 5%, 10%, somewhere along those lines.
Right. It was very, very little. And public pensions are a huge, huge liability to state and local governments. A tremendous. It's one of the reasons that we trying to move into more of a public sector. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble talking today, and I don't know why. I've been up. I got up early today. Yeah, it's Saturday. We're recording later this week because Gault's out of town, so we wanted to have Will in, and we're always interviewing for new co-hosts. Anything we can do to get rid of that dead weight is really good.
That was Spangle Gault.
Because he's listening. As soon as we post this, he's going to listen.
Yes, he is.
Well, I hope I can make your day miserable, little buddy.
On a side note, I read that Game of Thrones is the most pirated TV show.
Right.
Like ever or something.
Ever.
You guys, that Game of Thrones.
It's a really good show, but it's pirated because they make it so difficult to get at it. They they won't put any of the HBO shows on Netflix, so it's on HBO Go, and people just have less access to it. So there's so much buzz about it, people want to see it, so they steal it. Now I know we
could go into a long debate about intellectual property.
Right. I come from a radio background where you spend a lot of time and money to earn what you have to put forth for Game of Thrones, and then to give it away. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with you stealing Game of Thrones, you little torrenters.
Is it stealing? We're not going to get into
No, go ahead, say it.
No, because
go ahead.
we could take the whole episode up talking about this.
Well, I will limit us. Go ahead, say it.
Well, I'm saying that can you steal something that you don't necessarily own?
How do you not own it? If you put the money up...
Do you own the physical good of the actual tape that it's on? Or do you own the collection of light and sound put together in a certain pattern?
Or the electrons that are passing through the wire?
You buy the tape that the electrons go on. You put forth the money. The one scene, Gault said last week, one scene cost $7 million.
Okay.
You thieves, did you put up any money towards that $7 million? I voluntarily pay HBO to get a product.
That's just my point. It's not so much up to a legal set where it says, we're going to protect your right to have this collection, this organization of light and sound. It's your own responsibility to make sure no one takes it. So if you have to be innovative and find a way for the people not to take your collection of light and sound, then do it. But don't ask government to come in and make a law. Patent laws are a great example. Do you really own something when you patent it, or is the government just leasing you the idea to you? I think intellectual property is one of those grounds where it's like, I think even though there are arguments for intellectual property being existent, I think the cost benefits are that you should just kind of get rid of it. I mean, look at clothing industries. The always argument is like, if you don't have intellectual property,
can you really own the cotton? Can you really?
No,
own
but they actually have. They said you can't. They passed laws saying that you can't say that you own a belt. We can't have one clothing company say they own belts, and everyone who ever makes a belt has to pay them royalties for making a belt.
Right.
Well, clothing industries are kind of some of the most innovative as far as their little spectrum of the economy. They're very innovative, and they don't have any intellectual property protection outside of their logo. And
right.
I think that's a good example. People have written dissertations about intellectual property. We don't need to go into it on this show because I could go on for.
I just think that
eons.
I think that it's completely wrong for you to think that if HBO puts together this show, they front the money and take the risk of hiring writers, hiring staff to run HBO, hiring directors, buying film equipment, buying sets, buying costumes, putting the story together, making it a presentation that is good enough for people that they want to consume and will pay for it. And then you say, well, they have no right to charge. HBO has no right to say that you can't steal their material.
That's not true. What HBO has the right to do is only release it in the means that they see as fitting to a certain people who, if they say so, those certain people have to pay them money. Now, it's HBO's responsibility to make sure that they don't put it through in a medium that can be pirated. It's not.
But they're not. They're people are taking their hard drive from their DVR and copying that file over to a file like a Windows Movie or an AVI, and then those people who aren't connected with the HBO are uploading it to sites so it can be stolen.
I understand. I know. But what my point is that it's not. You can't own one particular collection of light and sound. Is my point. You can't. You can own your labor, but you can't necessarily.
That's like saying that you can't own a collection of metal, i.e., a car.
No, that's
collection
not.
Of
that's not
metal and plastic.
No, it's not. That's not at all what I'm saying. Because you own the property is the physical tape, the DVD set or whatever. But when you copy it, you're not stealing. You may be the argument is that you're stealing from future revenue, and then you get into future crime. Because if you copy, because the argument is that
Minority Report.
Yeah, no, that's really what it is. If you argue, the argument usually turns into if you copy a DVD, you're not stealing the original DVD. That DVD's fine. You can use it the exact same way. What you've done is you made a copy of it. Well, then the argument goes, well, then that's future revenue they could have gotten from a DVD that they would have made and sold. But then you get into future crime. And you're saying that because they didn't make revenue possibly off of this tape that you copied, then you have to be put in jail or be fined or something because you copied something. If you own a DVD, do you own it if you're not allowed to do what you want with it, including copy it?
Well, I've seen statistics that show that people that tend to pirate more and the torrenters and everything actually tend to buy the DVDs more because they end up loading it on there so other people can take it. So there is, while they may get some for free, they do end up going and buying because there's certain ones they want as a personal copy and something that they can also share. So
I mean, you can go into like there are horror stories of intellectual property. Monsanto's a great example. I mean, they have intellectual property protection over their organization or the genes for their corn.
It has gone from protection for the little guy. So if you have an idea or a product, it can't be stolen by people with unlimited capital. And now we've gone into with copyright and IP. We've gone into a place where people like Monsanto, the seed maker, and they ultimately think they make Roundup, Miracle Grow,
Agent Orange.
They're using copyright laws. Let me give you an example. If you grow soybeans and you buy Monsanto soybeans and you plant it in your field, and some of your soybeans just blow into another field of your next door neighbor who doesn't buy Monsanto beans, those cross-pollinate, and then they end up being the genetically modified version, which is basically becomes a Monsanto property. Monsanto will go to a farmer that didn't buy their soybeans but just had cross-pollination, and they will start lawsuits against that farmer for stealing their property, their intellectual property.
And basically run them out of they're little farmers, and it's a horror story. But I say the argument always like this is why capitalism is terrible, big bad business. I think it comes down to is that it's just a stupid intellectual property law.
Yeah, every farmer, there was a documentary, I think it was Food Inc., where it was here in Indiana, and the guy had a seed separator.
Yeah.
So if you grow crops, you can take your seeds and put them through this machine. It'll give you the seeds back. So you could grow crops and reuse the seeds every year, and you didn't have to buy new seed.
You're not allowed to do that under Monsanto's
you're not allowed to do that anymore because every crop out there is a Monsanto seed because of cross-pollination. And so every farmer used to have one of these seed splitters. Now there's maybe one in every county. And this guy was somewhere up north, I think in LaGrange, was being put out of business for just owning a seed separator.
Well, that kind of gets to me sometimes because Monsanto owns their patents and everything that they're allowed are so broad that most seed makers are already paying some kind of royalty to them. They're already covered under it in some way. I mean, it's no different than the phone makers, an iPhone, an Android, whatever it may be. They've been given patents that now they're fighting each other. You've got Motorola stepping in it.
All right. So like you said, we could talk about this all day, but let's not. Let's move on. We actually, I think this is our 11th episode. We finally have some listener mail.
Is it Gault?
Wow.
It's not Gault. Okay. Gault didn't write to himself.
Dear guys, I love Chris Gault on the show. He's hilarious. Give us more Chris Gault.
So, all right. John Muser, our good friend, he is the research director for the Libertarian Party of Marion County. John writes, just listen to episode 10, Zombies, Movies, and Syria. I'll preface this with saying I agree 100% with everything said about Syria and internationalism and non-interventionism. I'm just playing devil's advocate. Could it be considered a bit hypocritical that our country's revolution was supported financially by the government of our oppressor's opponent, meaning France, and now we are against the same kind of interventionism in other countries' revolutions? Was our revolution different? If so, why? On another note, I can't believe no one mentioned Thank You for Smoking or The Distinguished Gentleman. Thank You for Smoking is
because we talked about the movies.
Right.
Yeah, Thank You for Smoking is a great movie.
Do you think it's hypocritical, and was our revolution different than some of these other, because in many cases, we're the new France. We are funding other counter-revolutions. We're probably funding Syria's anti-government forces somehow. So we've benefited as a nation. We were born into freedom because we were benefited by France. So does that make us a hypocritical nation because, we're just not going to give the same chance to other nations?
Well, I mean, not necessarily. I think the ultimate question comes down to is what works better. Yes, France helped us out with financially, but at the same time, if you're going to say that is, the smoking gun that says, helping out other revolutions can really help out, the country and all this. First, you have to think, well, how many of these revolutions are occurring in countries that have dictators set up because we put them there? And if you take, let's say, 50% of those dictators were put there because of U.S. government, CIA involvement. Get those out of the way. So now you have 50% left. How many of those are revolutions, in trying to go against an actual enemy of ours? If the revolution was against the monarchy of Britain, or not the prime minister, parliamentary democracy of Britain.
We're taking on Queen Elizabeth, too.
Yes.
Come at us.
Haven't you seen that South Park?
Yeah.
Anyway, if it was against that, would we say, oh, well, we should support that revolution? It's like, are we saying we should support revolutions in their entirety because they are by themselves, they are in effect, just by their existence as a revolution, morally right? I mean, the question really comes down to is what is better for, our country as a whole? Is it better for our country to get involved in every little possible conflict in the world because there's a possibility that either Islamic fundamentalism or, during this the Soviet Cold War era, the Soviet communism, if you take that argument to its full extent, we literally have to, anytime there is a dispute between neighbors,
we have to pick sides.
You have to pick a side, and you have to say that we will control the terms of this, and it's just it's impossible. Non-interventionism really just means that you're not. I mean, you could argue that France was at war with Britain, and America was at war with Britain.
Spain was somewhere in there, I'm sure,
and they were both at war with Britain. And we're not at war with anybody. We don't declare war anymore. We just basically get involved in conflicts because
but we have had war declared on us by people like Osama bin Laden. So you don't go into places to fight them? Is that what you're saying?
I still think what's been said about a letter of marque and reprisal by Ron Paul was probably one of the best ways. You throw $1 billion out there, which is way less than what we've spent going after him, and say, no questions asked, go get him. Bring him back to us. He would have been here within a month. $1 billion.
Yeah, and your question is, if they declare war, like what if some dude in San Francisco who goes insane declares war on the federal government?
Well, he doesn't have a worldwide organization behind him. I mean,
but he may have a slingshot and he may put some eyes out.
Yeah, I mean,
that's apples and oranges.
You're arguing, but where's the line drawn? Is it if it's one country? If it's one country, one military, one guerrilla organization in one country?
Most of these overthrows and the coups and everything that happen usually aren't a philosophical revolution. It's just a revolution of they've treated us bad, we want in charge so we can treat them bad, is what it comes down to time and time again. It's when you have a true philosophical revolution like the American Revolution where you want to get away from a monarchy, basically a dictatorship, taxed without representation, soldiers coming into your home. I mean, we were going against that, and granted, we did, get some help from France on that. It does give it a little more nobility when you actually have a plan behind it, other than we're going to treat those guys bad again.
Yeah, you're just basically you're basically saying that it's two tribes who just basically have had a history of fighting, as opposed to implementing a new form of government. Well, but you could argue that in a place like Egypt, I think there's no doubt that they're moving from a dictatorship that's probably a little more secular towards a democracy that's a little more rooted in Islam. So there is a different form of government developing over there. I don't know, but I don't necessarily know. I mean, we kind of don't know where Egypt's going to land, for instance. We don't know if it's going to land at a true republic or a democracy, or it could end up in a military dictatorship. Again, we don't know.
And then the ultimate question becomes, whose choice is that? I mean, is it because we're America? Do we say that because we don't like military dictatorships that,
although U.S. imposed,
yeah, U.S. imposed,
right.
yeah,
Right.
but because we don't like them, because we're a democracy, quote quote, we're a republic, and all this kind of stuff, we support democratic uprisings, but God forbid they want a military dictatorship, then they're the enemy. It's like, is it not the country's choice, the people's choice? If the people choose, I mean, that's one of the problems with democracy, is that if it really is the people's choice, then they could choose a dictatorship and then democracy falls apart. And if you believe in the right of the people to choose, then you might have to believe that they can choose something you don't agree with. But once a military dictatorship is what has been chosen by the people, immediately we have to go in and stop the pit bull or stop the rabble. We have to protect them from these terrorists. It's like, no, well, if they chose it, then they chose it, and Well, you can't have both at once.
And we've started picking and choosing. North Korea is allowed to do whatever they want. They just kind of let Kim Jong-il have his little rants over there and fire rockets here and there and blow stuff up. And they're like, no, you don't do that. You don't do that.
Yeah, you get into the moral argument that, well, why are we not in Syria? Why are we not in many African countries? Why are we not...
We probably
stopping
are.
Genocides.
There's probably drones flying right now.
And that's probably there are drones flying over Center Grove right now that I know of. So there's drones everywhere now. Make sure you don't drink pop, or else you're targeted.
Yeah,
but
it better be under 16 ounces.
Yeah, I think where is that's always the libertarian argument is where does it stop? It is the slippery slope argument. It is. How many different places can we be before we become overextended? And I would argue that we're overextended because we wouldn't be in the current financial situation that we're in had we not been in 2 wars plus, the little bonus wars around the nation that we have, like Yemen, like Libya, and coming to you soon, Syria. So that costs a lot of money. Even though we only have, I think, less than 1% of our population mobilized militarily compared to... I think it was like 10 to 20% during World War II. It still is a drain on our economy.
It's not the number of people though. It's the amount of money spent now. A B-2 bomber, a fighter jet to fire one rocket from an RPG is probably several $1,000s.
And many of this technology that we're giving to our allies in these revolutionary
Osama.
People like Osama bin Laden is a great example. We funded the Mujahideen with Charlie Wilson's war, if you've seen that. Those weapons that he starts to buy for the Mujahideen, he's talking about Osama bin Laden and the Taliban, and we saw those weapons later when they were fired at our soldiers. So that's one of the other arguments for non-interventionism is you don't sow the seeds of your own destruction. You don't sow the seeds of your own misery. And you let people who are intelligent enough and bright enough to design their own system of government, you just let them do that. And if that means that it's a military dictatorship, then that's what they've chosen.
You can't do that, though, because then you have countries like Iraq, they threaten to go off the dollar standard. That was their whole thing back in the 90s, too, that caused a lot of issues. Iran's threatening to go off the dollar standard. They're wanting to go to the yuan of China.
China is threatening. China is... manipulating currency. That could be seen as an act of war. So are we going to go to war with China? Are we going to go to war with Russia? This is why you don't want to be the diplomat or the Secretary of State. So, especially...
I read an article, I think Robert Wenzel said that money supply growth is actually going down, which...
All right, and for our non-Austrians...
so if
explain that to Chris Gault.
Okay, anybody who knows anything about the Austrian business cycle theory, the long and short of it is...
Wikipedia that, if you don't know what that is.
The long and short of it is that in order to have sustainable growth that will not collapse, in order to not have a bust after a boom, is that the boom has to be paid for by voluntary savings, not printed money, fiduciary credit, as Mises would put it. So... one of the things is you have all this money. The money supply is expanded. M2 is what he's talking about, which is not just cash and check, but also some other stuff. Is included.
Most of the money in the United States, things like Treasury bills, too,
yes.
Right? Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It's basically M2 is stuff that's barely not money. It's like cash, you can go and spend it now. M2 is you might have to do something to it before you can spend it, but it's going to be like 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. That money supply growth is apparently going down. Well, one of the main indicators of when a recession is going to hit after a boom, because a boom is unsustainable in perpetuum, usually what breaks it down is either rising interest rates or a reduction in the money supply, which causes rising interest rates eventually, but deflation. And deflation is one of the biggest kickers for starting a recession after an artificial boom. This is not to say to anybody who's listening that deflation is bad. This is to say that after a boom, deflation can kickstart the recession that is inevitable. But the M2 money supply is going down, according to this article, and I haven't looked at the exact numbers yet. And if that's the case, and Bernanke doesn't do anything about it, if we don't have like a QE4 or something, QE3, whatever number we're on, then there's a high possibility that this recession is going to be based off of the boom that Bernanke has created to stop the 08 recession, is going to come crashing down in the near future. And if the money supply is going down, it's going to be the near future, like, probably this year, if not next year.
Before the election.
Yeah.
Which means President Mitt Romney, maybe. I hope not. And I'm not rooting for Barack Obama either. So go Gary Johnson, because it's certainly not going to be Ron Paul.
Isn't Roseanne Barr running on the Green Party ticket? I think I.
Yeah, we'll just let that hang out there. Now, Will, I never ask these questions for myself because, as you know, I'm a very intelligent man. I only ask these for our listeners. Creighton, can you put all that into regular English for our listeners? Does that mean that you think that we're going to have a recession that is 08-like? Or do you think that it's going to be a mini recession? What do you think is going to happen?
All right, let's look at the Great Depression.
So, because basically what he said is that Bernanke printed a lot of money, created a small boom, and now it looks like that money supply is shrinking, so we're going to have another bust. And so they need to do something to avoid a bust by creating another artificial boom. And
continue the one we're on.
And when they stop that cycle, that means pain for everybody.
Well, the heart of the Austrian business cycle theory is that you can't sustain a boom forever. A boom is it's kind of like a sugar high, and everything feels nice while you're on the sugar high. Prices are going up for everybody, and people are getting more. But what ends up happening is it's an illusion. Ludwig von Mises uses the example of...
Yeah, it seems like a great idea for you to get $1,200 for your 1996 Honda Accord. Man, I'm getting $1,900 for
and
this.
It's not just inflation. It's not
Yeah.
It's not just an argument saying that inflation happens. It's more or less a misallocation and overconsumption theory.
Mm-hmm. Those are big words.
Yes. Mises, who is pretty much the founder of this theory, he has an example. It's basically, imagine a guy is building a house. He's not allowed to look at his supply of bricks. He is just told that he has X number of bricks. And based upon his understanding of engineering, he knows with X number of bricks, he can build a house that is yay big. Well, since he hasn't actually looking at his supply of bricks, he's been told he has X number. What he finds out after he's about halfway through it that he only has Y number of bricks, which is substantially less than X. And he cannot finish the house the way he has designed it because he doesn't have enough supply. He's been following a false indicator. He's been, tricked essentially into thinking that he has enough of a supply to build this house. So what would be better for him to find out later, after he basically has 3/4 of the house done, that he has to tear it down and start over, or halfway done? And that's essentially what happens. It's not so much that it's a undersupply, it's a misallocation of goods. He has misallocated the amount of goods he has, the amount of supply he has, to a project that is unsustainable. It will come crashing down eventually. It's just a matter of when. And the longer you wait, the harder the crash will be. That's essentially what happened in 2008. You had a misallocation of goods, and the mortgage crisis is basically a reflection of the low interest rate boosting housing. So much supply was going into housing. And that could be supply as labor, supply as financial instruments, supply as wood, anything. Right. All the supply is going into housing as if there's this enormous demand for it. But when it comes down to it, people did not actually save their money and release goods in the present for goods in the future, which would be the houses. And after everything as the chickens came home to roost, it all crashed. And it crashed because it wasn't so much that, it's unfortunate. It's actually necessary because the goods are not going into areas that reflect the market. The market isn't demanding them this way. The Fed has manipulated the interest rate to people to think that the market wants it this way. It's actually worse if you let it continue this direction because it's all going to come crashing down eventually anyway. So the recession is pretty much a correction of that, saying that this is what the market wants to do really. This is how people are acting in real world. Based upon their actions in the real world, this is what they want. So Mark Charles corrected. The worst thing you can do is try and stop that recession from clearing the market.
Right, because libertarians sometimes seem like heartless bastards who are rooting for some sort of economic collapse. And we're really not. It is that we're not – reality isn't being reflected, and we're just making our pain worse, and we don't want more people to get hurt. I mean, people get hurt in a market economy. That's just how it is, and we've talked about this on the show in the past.
That's just life in general.
There is no guarantee in life. You may be one of the people who has financial hardship. So what do is you pick yourself up and you start a business, or you get better skill training. You know, you're supposed to adapt to life. There is no guarantee that that the government or society at large can guarantee that you're going to walk out of your house today and come back safely.
That's why we're ensured the pursuit of happiness. No, you're not guaranteed happiness.
Right.
You're not guaranteed a standing in life. No matter where you come from, you can start as the poorest person in the world and make great money. You could come up in a family and be like George Bush Jr. and run oil companies into the ground, even though your dad did fairly well with it.
Yeah, and so we're not rooting for any kind of catastrophe. It's that we want less people to get hurt. You know, we want less people. We want that crash
A less
to be
severe
less
reaction.
a less severe reaction.
What's better for a person who's super drunk? To give them more alcohol to make them so that their upset stomach, they can't feel it as much because they're drunker, or just pull the bottle from them and make them throw up, go to sleep, wake up with a hangover.
And now finally you understand economics.
Yes.
So,
If there's anything, if no one's gotten economics before, you'll find out that many economic truths can be described through very random analogies to real world.
See, the market is a lot like Reddit, okay? It's a lot like Rage Comics. You have some very basic rules in Rage Comics, and you all have to play by the rules, but sometimes there can be new developments, like the troll phase.
Yes.
All
But ultimately, if the money supplies the money supply decreasing would be tantamount to, I mean, it's what it'll do is it will force prices to go down. And because the value of the dollar goes up. Essentially, inflation at large only occurs because the amount of money in the economy goes up.
That's why gas is $4 a gallon. It's not because it costs that much to produce it. It's because that's what it's worth.
Well, there's also, an 80-cent tax on it?
Yeah, and so, you know, think about it. You have to look at it as a supply chain. When you get less money for a product. So when you get less money for a bottle of water, well, then I'm looking at the Nestle Pure Life bottle here, and that's bottled in Greenwood, Indiana, I believe, isn't it?
Is it a municipal water
Greenwich,
supply?
Connecticut. But yeah, it's Greenwich, Connecticut, which is the supply. So when you can charge less for a bottle of water, that's less revenue for the company, so they have less money to put into research and development on new water or a bottle maker or technology to make jobs easier for their employees.
Well, that's true.
That's where it starts to really
that's
affect
true.
people.
That's true, and that's why. But the thing is it's not so much prices going down in general that's really kind of bad, because if you think about it, if you increase supply, like if you produce, everything in the economy is produced. If more production occurs, then prices will go down in general because there's more. It's like a fraction.
It's like a baseball card. The more of something there is, the less it's worth.
So prices in general will go down if there's more production. It's not a bad thing for prices to go down because if there's more water bottles made, then prices will go down. It doesn't mean revenue will go down. It means the prices are going down in each marginal unit. The problem with the money, with manipulating the money supply, is you can't essentially what it comes down to is you cannot create actual wealth, real physical goods, through printing money. That's what they try and do. They try and print money and say that is tantamount to creating wealth. And it doesn't work like that. All it does is shift wealth around to what places it really wouldn't go had you not printed the money. And when you can't print money in perpetuum because you'll have hyperinflation like Weimar Germany, or you'll have inflation like the 1970s in America.
Zimbabwe.
Or Zimbabwe.
I've got $1 trillion of Zimbabwe money in my
so
office.
you can't print it in perpetuum. So you have to but what ends up happening is once you stop printing it in perpetuum, You caused that recession to happen. That essentially it's going to happen inevitably. It's not a matter of, can we keep the boom going on forever? You can't. It's just logically impossible. That recession's going to happen. And that's what he's alluding to in this article, is that it's possible that since the money supply is going down, and if Bernanke doesn't try and pump it up with more money, then the recession could be more close than we all thought it would be.
Which I know Bernanke spoke to Congress earlier this week, and I didn't see a lot of news reports. Is that where they think he's headed? He's headed for another quantitative easing?
He probably is. I don't think Bernanke has the gall to not expand the money supply more. And his biggest fear is deflation. I mean, he's afraid of deflation like Chucky Finster was afraid of clowns. I mean,
Explain deflation to our listeners.
Deflation is just general price decrease. Everything in the economy going down in price. It means your dollar's worth more is what it means.
And it can it can mean less revenue, but deflation, it can make prices go down quickly, and so companies don't have the time to respond in some cases.
Essentially, artificial
value, though.
Right.
Artificial deflation's bad. Artificial deflation. Deflation caused by just printing off more dollar bills or destroying more dollar bills.
And value versus revenue is a huge distinction as well.
Yeah. So
if you look at the back of your book, if you bought a book 10 years ago, you always are like, man, I'd hate to live in Canada. This book's $5 more. Canada's money, last time I checked, was like $1.02 to our $1. So you now have more purchasing power if you're using Canadian money than if you have American money.
Yeah,
and that's what we're talking about.
And so Bernanke's terrified of deflation. He's wrote it in his dissertations. He's been writing about it for years. He believes that the Great Depression was caused by falling prices. I mean, Bernanke's not a smart guy. I mean, he's a smart guy in the sense that he's more intelligent than most. But when it comes to economic theory, he's just basically a cookie-cutter Keynesian who has this particular idea about the Great Depression, and he's putting it into effect now. He thinks prices going down are the worst thing that could ever happen to the world, and he's going to do everything he can to keep that from happening. He said he'd throw money out of a helicopter if it made prices go up.
Yeah.
And so I don't see him as allowing this to happen. I think what Ben Bernanke is going to do is to cause this recession to hit is I think he's either going to just keep printing money and we're going to start seeing really hard inflation and he'll have that happen, or or something will happen and he'll raise interest rates because he doesn't want that inflation to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But those have been guaranteed to stay low for the next 2 years.
That's what he says now. But again, I mean, like I said, I just don't think he has the cojones to let the prices go down.
Right.
That's just his boogeyman is decreasing prices. So he's going to say interest rates need to go up or the dollar needs to be, a little bit more inflated, like 1970s style inflation. Either way, I can almost guarantee Ben Bernanke's not going to let prices go up, so you don't need to worry about prices go down. So don't think that's going to happen in the near future while he's the chairman, because it's not. Yeah. He's not going to let it happen.
All right, so we got about 15 minutes left. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. And Gault, we know you want to talk about it, so we'll have you weigh in next week. But we can't not go this podcast without mentioning the prodigal son. What is your opinion on? Set the story for us, Creighton.
Oh, Rand Paul has endorsed Mitt Romney for president. An official endorsement, not like that kind of maybe endorsement from a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's an official endorsement, and the Daily Paul and all the various chat rooms and Ron Paul forums are up in arms.
I guess the Pauls can do some wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to play by the rules sometimes, though. That's the whole thing.
I'm bittersweet on this one. I don't like Mitt Romney. I know probably every single Ron Paul supporter doesn't like Mitt Romney, and I'm pretty sure Rand Paul probably doesn't like Mitt Romney.
Right.
It's just, I feel like Jack Hunter always has a good quote I like. He says, you can compromise politically to advance principle. And that's a good thing to keep in mind. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to be, oh, you're just for politics as usual, but there are some times where...
Thanks for saying it for me.
As long as you are not sacrificing what you believe in, and you aren't doing anything that's going to cause your beliefs to lose ground, then I am begrudgingly okay with playing by typical politic rules. And if that means Rand Paul has to endorse Mitt Romney because it's a better chance for a Rand Paul 2016 because all the Republicans will, because they're all idiots anyway, they'll think that he's one of us because he endorsed Mitt Romney, even though he pretty much votes very closely to his father.
But see, this makes me not want to support him if he were to run in 2016. This is the problem with compromise. When you compromise, you start to drift, and you start to.
But he hasn't yet.
Yeah,
it's not fair to say that. It's not fair to say that. Though.
He has never been his dad. He's never been.
He's never been perfect. But
No.
I mean, in comparison to some other, I mean, he's pretty close in the Senate to what his dad.
But
would do.
it is fair to say it because once you start endorsing people who don't share your values, especially when you have, and you can say, "Oh, well, it's not." It's not politically possible for him to endorse Gary Johnson when they have the same exact beliefs. Horse crap. I mean, it really, at a certain point, are you trying to advance the notoriety of your beliefs? Are you trying to go out there and share libertarianism and explain libertarianism?
Now. It's all celebrity. It's who's got the biggest hair, who's got the coolest smile, who can point the best. Bill Clinton with the bent finger. I did not.
I know, and there is no better looking candidate than Ron Paul. And I agree with you, but the fact is that this is just a total, this is the kind of stuff that Republicans do. They endorse other Republicans. They compromise on their beliefs for political expediency, and you have to do some of that. But
it's
at
not
the same
fair
time,
to say that Rand has done that.
I haven't said my butt yet. I want to talk about my butt. Okay,
I don't know if I like where this conversation's going.
Never mind, but you have to at a certain point say this person is so far from my ideals that I can't support him for president, and I don't care if it's going to hurt me politically, so be it. Because the brave people in politics are the ones that actually do make it. They're the ones that they're idolized because they are the ones who have courage, they have the courage of their convictions, and they don't give a crap if you agree or not.
But the thing is if you look at this historically, I mean, yes, the brave people are the ones that stand up in the face of the Leviathan and say, you shall not pass. But look where we're at in America.
Yeah, because of actions like Rand Paul.
No, that's not true. We've had juggernauts in the past that stood up for liberty that did follow this, one man in the wilderness versus, the 1,000-headed beast. And really, you get a following out of that, but the state gets bigger. It gets bigger, and it gets bigger, and it gets bigger, and it gets more control. But
Rand Paul just endorsed one of the candidates that's going to keep making it bigger.
When guys like Barry Goldwater, who stand there, are traditional conservatives, can't even win in the Republican Party back then, you have to compromise. Now, I mean, back then he stood.
I mean, the way I'm looking at it is this.
And why are you still talking about a senator from 40 years ago?
Why?
Because it's still relevant.
I'm not saying that you're not going to get a following, you're not going to get respect from being that guy standing up to the 1,000-headed beast. My point is that if Rand Paul endorses Mitt Romney, I can look past that for a second if I believe that he is just playing politics. Wait, will he vote like Mitt Romney in the Senate?
So you're saying that Rand Paul is saying something that he doesn't believe for political gain. Isn't that exactly what we're against as libertarians and me specifically as a member of a third party?
I'm against the growth of the state. So if he does this and it allows it makes a ground set, he sets the ground for him to become more of a player in the Republican Party, therefore more of a player within the United States government, and put forth actions that will reduce the state, I'm okay with that because he hasn't surrendered any of his principles. The Republican Party is just a bunch of people sitting around in a country club smoking cigars. As long as you tell them you're cool, buddy, but you do something that they don't like. I mean, yeah, they're just a bunch of old dudes with comb overs that
man woman haters.
Yeah, they're really just. So yeah,
So then why
tickle,
are you giving them so much power then?
You're not giving them power by endorsing
He's
Mitt
just
Romney.
cut off his knees with his entire base, with all of the Ron Paul. This is the idiocy of this endorsement, is that Ron Paul has built a movement, and over the last 4 years, after 30 years of standing tall and being reelected by standing on his principles and not endorsing bozos like this, he has been reelected time and time again, and he's well known for it. And 40 years from now, people will be talking about Ron Paul just like we're still talking about Barry Goldwater, because he didn't do dumb stuff like this. And you lose that support when you start to compromise in ways like this.
Yes, but there is.
And we want to talk about where is the line. Well, this is crossing the line.
I politely disagree. I look at politicians not only for their message but for their action. And an action in Congress is a vote. That's the action that counts. How do they vote? How do they put their name on a piece of paper as far as increasing or decreasing the state? And I see I see an endorsement of Mitt Romney as, yes, Mitt Romney's a terrible candidate, but I mean, just at least give Rand Paul some credit. It has absolutely no legal effect on the process at all.
So 3 years from now,
Rand Paul could endorse, Roseanne Barr for the Green Party if he went and voted the way that I know is worth voting. I'm not saying Rand Paul votes perfectly.
Campaign and say all the dumb crap you
He's
want.
not campaigning for him, is he?
3 years from now, you're going to see Rand Paul on Fox News or CNN, and you're going to see him sitting there, and they're going to play an uncomfortable tape of Rand Paul endorsing Mitt Romney, and then they're going to come back, and Wolf Blitzer is going to say,
flounder. You're dealing with an
and then,
Obama campaign.
Hold on. And then you're going to see, they're going to roll a tape of him endorsing Mitt Romney 3 years from now, and then you're going to see Wolf Blitzer say, that was you 3 years ago when you supported him, and now you're not supporting Mitt Romney's tax raises. Why are you not supporting the president's agenda? Well, because of this, this, and this. It just, what do you get from it? You don't get anything. I think Ron Paul supporters are not going to vote for Mitt Romney.
You could just as easily get Hillary to run against Obama this time around and would probably stand a really good chance against him. And they went against each other in an election where she was, brought into the cabinet. And yet she probably doesn't back him on a lot of the stuff. I know her husband doesn't. So it's no different. He could say, yeah, I like him, and he wants to watch, maybe Romney gets the presidency. Maybe he flounders like he did in Massachusetts. Job growth comes to a complete halt. He was 47th in the country in job growth in Massachusetts. All of this it's the same presidency is all it's going to be. And you can watch him flounder and be like, look, you guys screwed up here. You screwed up here. I may have endorsed him, but I've always voted the way, like Creighton's saying, I've always voted the way I said I would. I've always voted like my dad did. He's a Republican. That's what he was elected as.
Yeah, he's a Republican, and that's what I have a problem with.
Yes. And
he's acting like a Republican.
For me,
and I'm not a Republican, and I never will be ever again.
I have not reached the point where I have lost hope that there is an attempt to reshape the Republican Party, and I know you think that's a futile effort, but I don't think that,
because I've done that for 10, I did that for 6 years,
and I don't think Ron Paul or Rand Paul or the Paul family thinks it's a futile effort yet. And I believe that this is an effort to get Rand Paul seen as the more Republican Paul, even though when it comes down to how they vote, they're pretty similar. I mean, yes, Rand Paul is not exactly the same as his dad, and he's a little bit less like his dad on foreign policy. But if you take Ron Paul and Rand Paul and compare the similarities compared to Ron Paul and any other member of Congress, maybe except Justin Amash or Mike Lee, I mean, the similarities are so pronounced that if he has to basically bite his tongue and say, yeah, Mitt Romney's pretty cool, so that in 4 years, the Republican Party be like, Rand Paul, we're not going to attack you. We're not going to keep you out of debates like we did your dad and all this kind of stuff because you're one of us. Even though the way he votes is way different than what Republican Party stands for.
And that's why he'll never be part of the club.
But that's just it.
I don't get it.
I don't think the Republican Party.
As long as you don't vote the way they want you to vote, they will never accept you and they will kick you out. And then you're going to have no friends at all because the establishment won't support you, and you've compromised so far that your supporters won't support you.
Well, when Rand Paul doesn't support,
this is the uncomfortableness that I have with the Pauls right now. It's the fact that I thought that they were above the political games. Yes, they played the politics, but they had this belief system that they wanted to support and promote and vote on, and it could never be compromised. And now it seems like we're getting into a territory with the Pauls where now we're compromising to gain political power for our family, not necessarily for our principles, but more for our family. And I don't know if that's where they're headed or that's how they're thinking, or maybe they've evolved to that point, but I'm saying they're getting close to the line, and it makes me uncomfortable. And I don't think you guys can look at the situation reasonably and not agree with that.
I don't agree that making a decision that has absolutely no legal effect, as long as it doesn't affect, as long as like you said, if Rand Paul in the future does compromise his principles and start voting the way Mitt Romney would vote, that's when I'm not going to like the guy. But when Rand Paul is voting the way he's voted, which I can support pretty much to an extent. I mean, no politician's perfect. There's things that I disagree about with Ron Paul, but if he can continue that voting style and at the same time, because we also have to remember that the Republican Party as it exists is going to go the wayside because of the great gains that Ron Paul has made in the various caucus states. Pat Robertson's campaign is a great example of how that works. Ron Paul has done something very similar, and a Rand Paul that's tight with the Republican Party is going to be a Rand Paul that's tight with a Paul-style Republican Party, if, to an extent, I mean, it's not going to be complete or anything. You'll still have the Northeast Republicans and whatnot. But my point is that it's not fair to understand that politics is a game of basically haircuts, smiles, and telling the right person that you are cool and make their ego feel nice. And at the same time, they didn't compromise anything as far as the increase or decrease of the state. They still vote certain ways. They say this is wrong, and they don't vote this way. I mean, one of the reasons that I like Ron Paul is because in the face of the beast, he voted one direction. If Rand Paul can vote in one direction and basically tell the beast that you have a nice haircut, I'm okay with that.
I'm sorry. It's just a shallowness in a politician that I don't like. And I don't care if he's on my team or not. I'm going to call him out. And that's the problem, is not enough libertarians. Well, actually, a lot of libertarians are calling him out. You know, I don't like Adam Kokesh's show because it's on Russian TV. It's on a Putin-funded network. Yeah, does RT, Russia TV, or Russia Today, or whatever it is, did they advance some libertarian thought? Of course.
But
it's a deal with the devil.
You're the first one that always says that these people who are so these libertarians that are so stubborn in their ways that they look to the 100 years from now stuff and they don't look at the present. Mm-hmm. You're the first one to say that they're stupid. And I feel like right now you're being the kind of person that says, "No, this is just too bad. No. He's not pure. He's not pure."
I'm saying,
and I feel like you're basically going back on what you've always argued.
No,
is wrong.
I'm not. I'm saying that he has crossed the line. You play the political game, but at a certain point, you have to look at your own integrity and say, I'm not going to endorse someone whose policies are so different from mine, and I'm not going to do that just for personal gain. I'd rather say nothing. I'd rather just not endorse anyone. And then if it becomes a story, it'll become a one-day story on Daily Caller, and a million people will see it.
The line
will
going to be left alone about it. If they were going to keep coming to him. Well, now that who you going to support, and if your dad's not, they were going to come to him time and time again. He wasn't going to avoid the question. You can only avoid it so many times.
The line is crossed when he starts voting differently, and that's what it comes down to for me. When he starts voting as a statist, he's lost all respect in my book. But until then, I'm willing to go with the punches and say, you try your tactics. You vote the right way, but you try your tactics. And if they work, they work. If they don't, they don't.
I've seen government and how it operates for the last 8 years. And when you start giving them an inch, they're going to take a mile. They're going to start beating up on you even harder now because you've made this one little step, this one little sign to the Republican Party that you're with them. They're now going to start beating up on you for how you vote. And they know that you're willing to play the game.
They've already thought
but
he
it's
was
going
part
to
of their
get worse
system.
and worse and
he
worse.
Already thought everybody in the Republican Party looked at him as more of one of them, even though the way he's voted this entire first term of senator, he's voted in a very pretty much libertarian way, not libertarian pure, but libertarian more to an extent than others. And he's never been hated on for that. And a lot of Republicans will say, I like Rand compared to Ron, even though they're very similar.
Grassroots Republicans.
He's already said that he already is one of those guys, but he hasn't compromised his voting yet. And or I don't know. I'm just saying what it comes down to is for me is this: it's all a charade. Politics is all planned out imagery. The real stuff that matters, that affects me, is the increase or decrease of the federal government and the state governments. If a person votes to decrease the state or at least keep it from increasing, I can respect that person, even if that person, does political tactics that I think are stupid, or he endorses people I don't like. As long as he is not the one who is actually voting to increase the state, he has my respect, because that's really the only thing that directly affects me, and that's the only thing that, as far as history is concerned, that's the only thing the history books are going to care about.
And we got to wrap up, but I'm not saying that I've lost all respect for him. I'm not saying that I'm throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm saying it's a warning sign, and you better watch it. And for you Paul haters who think that I hate Ron Paul, I took that I side with quiz on Facebook. I side with Ron Paul 97% of the time, which is, I don't know if it's higher than Gault's. I thought he said it was. Maybe he didn't. And I side with Barack Obama 11% of the time. So I was more proud of the 11%, actually. So, all right, real quick, is there anything coming up that you guys want to talk about? I know you guys are on summer vacation on the college circuit.
Not that I know of. I mean, it's pretty much just summer. I mean, is there anything Mr. Quantz would like to inform our listeners of is coming up in the near future?
Not that I can think of. Just a few bike rides, but that's about it. So,
check out our Facebook page. We Are Libertarians. You can go to wearelibertarians.com. If you want to agree with my completely right point about Rand Paul, then you can leave us a note there. If you want to disagree with me and vote with Creighton, then I'll just delete it. But that's okay. No, I'm just kidding. Wearelibertarians.com. Write us a note, just like John did. We'll respond to it next week. And this is a fluid situation. It seems like every week there's some new development and new situation. The Republican state convention's going on right now. I don't know if I haven't checked Facebook or Twitter to see if there's any sort of disenfranchisement or anything.
Occupy?
There is. I know that there was a group of Gary Johnson supporters that were going down there to pass out flyers to a lot of the Ron Paul people. So Gault will weigh in next week unless Will wants to come back and be our permanent co-host. So
I mean, we can have 4.
I don't know. I just like the idea of 3.
The triumvirate. You have to
right, yeah.
Why don't we do a quadrumvirate?
No, Gault doesn't say much anyways.
Yeah.
I'm just teasing you, Gault. Can't wait to have you back next week.
You guys are so mean to me.
Closing remarks?
Anything, Will?
Thanks for having me, guys. Been a good time.
I know me and Spangle tend to take up most of the talking time.
Yeah,
usually,
especially when we're arguing.
It's my first time, so.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
But there's no reason you can't come back.
Yep. Gault's gonna be so mad next week. When I worked in radio at the radio station, and you'd be out, like if Abdul took a day off and he had a co-host. It was his day off, but he'd still get up at 6 a.m. to listen to make sure that other guy wasn't better than him and didn't steal his job. So I know that. So I know Gault's sitting there getting mad. So it just kind of makes me laugh.
Well, this is very not.
This isn't
from
real
the top.
radio.
This isn't from the top down. So I think if we
Trust me,
we want 4, then let's have 4. Why not?
This is much more professional than WXNT ever was. So all right, guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening in.
Is that mic not as powerful or something? Because I feel like I'm always quieter.
You're just talk quiet.
I just talk quiet.
Yeah, and it drives me crazy. I'm like, all right, you host. Welcome to We Are Libertarians. My name's Creighton Harrington.
Well, I can yell if you need me to.
I don't need you to yell. I need you to be excited.
I'm gonna talk weenie in the butts.
Hey, good morning.
Weenie in the butt.
See, look at your signal.
You got butt slammed. Butt slammed.
Okay. All right. So give me your normal talking voice. God. This podcast is produced by What is a Hoosier Productions.